Welcome back. You're listening to the discussion Cloud Migration and Optimization for Government, sponsored by Thundercat Technology and Dell Technologies on Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guests today are Mitchell Schwartz, a systems engineer at Thundercat Technology, Ed Krajcik, the manager of Isilon Systems Engineers at Dell Technologies, Oki Mek, the senior advisor to the chief information officer at the Department of Health and Human Services, and Chris Brown, the deputy chief information security officer at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Before break, we were talking just a little bit about the data management and how data fits in with the cloud strategy. And really, if the two aren't walking together down the path, you're missing a big piece of your strategy. Let me ask Chris this question around data architecture. How are you guys dealing with this balancing of data, cloud, and making sure that you're not hitting a fork in the road?
So we have a big effort right now to bring our data together across the agency and create some rules on governance rules on how that data can be used and joined or not joined so that people can use it for visualizations and then make decisions. And as a result of that need, we're realizing that we need some decisions around our data architecture and where it is and how we're going to manage it. We had a master data management program, and this is kind of like the next level of maturation for us. And so we realized that we actually needed a data architect like yesterday in order to help us with this. So we're right in the midst of that right now in terms of where do we put it, where's the best place to put it for now until we get smarter, and we're grappling with that, and we're going to bring in some assistance and make the best decisions we can at this point.
Now, are you hiring a person with that title, or,
yes,
or a contractor, or some sort of combination?
So we would love to be able to hire somebody again, like tomorrow. Unfortunately, the federal hiring process isn't that agile, right? So we're going to bring in some contract support and then pursue a data architect as a Fed.
One of the things, go ahead.
To that end of bringing all that data together, I mean, that's a concept that we've been working with for quite some time with Isilon and the whole concept of the data lake and being able to, have multiple different departments, agencies, what have you, bring data together into a single repository. Again, it's all secure, managed by, access controls and things like that, but it sits together, and then we do have the ability to run analytics across a larger pool of data in different ways that weren't normally, analyzed together at the same point. Being able to do things like regressions and cross correlations that create, or you get to pull business intelligence out of that data that has never been gleaned before, and actually, actionable intelligence to be able to make business decisions or realize new potential, business activities or customer activities, as what's going on with the data, by identifying trends that hadn't been, previously brought together before to be identifiable.
And that's really the key here, that the data analytics, that the cloud, and when you merge the cloud and the data and those pieces and parts together, is really the bigger benefit. Oki, maybe talk a little bit about how HHS is really starting to take advantage of the cloud to drive data decisions.
Yeah, I think data is very critical. Realistically, the past 2 years alone, we have created more data than our entire existence of mankind. That's 90% of our data, and 80% of it is unstructured. So that's why machine learning is very critical into making sense of the data, having the data and having insight and trying to use the data to make it smarter. It's critical because you can't really manage something if you can't measure it. Analyzing, user behavior, analyzing system behavior, and trying to optimize it, constantly improving, and also evolving as you go, because things are changing so rapidly. Technology is changing rapidly, data is coming all over the place. So it's very critical that you think about data. And the second point I want to say to that is that we still dealing with a lot of paper. We just need to get away from paper. I always use the analogy around filing taxes. The early 50s, 60s, you file taxes, you use paper. It takes a week, 2 weeks to file your taxes because you have to go hunt down the data. Early 2000, you could file it online, which takes still a couple days. But now they're using TurboTax. You could do it within an hour because data are being pulled from different systems and aggregated in the background using RPA, using analytics, giving you a confidence score at the end. That's the future of business function in the government or even in private sector. I think we need to shift away from paper and try to digitize or focus on digitize, because you want to do AI and RPA, you can't do it with paper, I'm telling you right now. you have to, the biggest part will be digitizing the data and cleaning the data in order you could do AI or RPA.
And that's where you see AI RPA come into play, is actually digitizing the data itself to get off of paper. So we've been working on a project with a customer where they have to read barcodes and scan in data so they can share it with other healthcare agencies. And they're using RPA to be able to do that and AI to be able to do that. So it's actually becomes part of the solution to help you even get off the old paper that's sitting there on the shelves.
You brought me back when you mentioned about filing your taxes with paper. You had to go to the post office or the library and get your tax forms, and oh, the good old days, right? One of the things about this push towards better analytics, I mean, is really the end goal for all agencies is to be able to use their data to make better decisions. Ed, walk me through a little bit about what you're seeing when you talk to your customers. Is that their end goal too, when they talk about moving to the cloud, when they talk about having a hybrid setup?
Yeah, I mean, initially it's not. Initially it's more just, an easier way to manage the data, consolidate the data, and then it's more of a progression, and the light bulbs start to go off, and it's like, oh, well, now I've got all my data in one place. I can start to do different things with it and get that intelligence, or, hey, I never compared this versus that, and now all of a sudden I'm realizing a trend that I never, realized existed, in my customer base or what have you. So from that perspective, I don't think, I think where the industry has gone has now made that a bigger, direction. But I think initially it was more of a progression. Now I think because we've come so far and being able to use analytics and AI and things like that, that now you go into it with what am I going to get out of it now, or what business intelligence can I glean out of this now?
And the tools are easier to use. I mean, I was talking with a CIO just recently, and they talked about using, we have this dashboard, and this program gives us this dashboard, and we can use decision making and the pulls from this data lake or this data source. So I think the tools are easier. We talk about software as a service. That's what a lot of these are.
And
Mitchell?
that was going to be the point I was going to make is now the AI ML is built into a lot of platforms, a lot of applications, where when AI ML started happening, it's, well, here's AI ML, and now go write applications against it, and you had to learn how to do it. And having those applications and platforms ready to go just quickly enables that capability.
Are you seeing that there's a learning curve, though? Okay, I have it now. Okay, I can do some. Okay, there's a lot of people, a lot of agencies, or a lot of even in the private sector. Okay, great, I have this technology. What do I do with it, or how do I use it? Or is it it's simple? It's hey, just put the data in, and the machine will tell you what comes out. I mean,
it's a little bit of the it depends answer.
I keep asking you these questions.
It depends answer. I mean, some of the people are very resistant to change, so that's part of it. And some of them really don't know what answers they can get out of their data because they've never asked it that kind of question before. So I think some of them are kind of surprised by the results. They've never looked at not just where the results take them, but the opposite of the results take them. Because a lot of times they just look for the answers to their questions, not what the data could tell them outside of that.
Chris?
Yeah, so that's a critical piece, right? You do need to understand the data, and you need to understand, this is what I was talking about, join or not join, because you can get answers out of the data that might not be true, right? And so you do need to understand what that foundation is and then create some rules around how it can be used and shared, because you could get someone running a result getting one answer and then somebody else getting a different answer, and that just can't work, right?
Well, that's the evolution of like new functions in the organization too. I mean, we talked about the data architect. I mean, what about the data scientist role of really actually being able to figure out ways to use that data? Probably
another position that Chris is trying to hire. So
yeah, probably.
Okay,
can I add to that? I think before even getting the data, you need to understand what are the pain points and what are some of the use cases that requires the data sets. We use a lot of human-centered design and really going out and talking to the workforce and engaging the workforce to understand what the pain points are. We have the requirements. Federal requirements are very similar, I could tell you right now, but just understanding the pain points, what things that we could improve upon, but human-centered design also help in terms of marketability as well, in terms of getting people engaged and collaborate, and also to champion what you're trying to do. if they're engaged, they will champion what you're trying to do because they are actually feeding into this innovation because Jeff Bezos mentioned that, hey, there's no innovation without adoption. You have to get the workforce to adopt what you're trying to do. That's why I say you start with a use case before you even look at the data set, because some data set, like Chris said, might not even work, but you also could reinforce it if you engage them regularly every 2-3 weeks. Hey, does this work, or does this cluster of machine learning, is it providing the right outcome? And then you refine it. It's almost like training a child, really. You teach them something and you reinforce. You teach something, you reinforce. And I think that's the key.
So it's almost like what Chris, your discussion in the last segment around the researchers who were like, wait a minute, I want to pull my data. No, you can do it there. Once they learned what they could do, I'm sure they were like, you probably had to slow them down and be like, okay, relax. We have rules and guardrails here for a reason.
That's right.
Very similar.
So we're leveraging human-centered design with that data visualization project that we've got going. So absolutely on board with that. In terms of RPA, we're looking at it. We've got several use cases laid out, and we see it as an augmentation for staff because we're getting squeezed in terms of the amount of hires. I don't have a whole bunch of FTE vacancies that I'd love to fill them, but I don't have it, right? We need to do more with the staff that we have. We need to do more with the data that we have. RPA is going to help us get there because we can free staff from doing some things, transition that work to RPA, and then we can use them to do those human jobs that we can't get a computer to do for us yet.
In the higher level tasks, right? It frees
right.
them up from
That's right.
a low level, very repetitive, very
Absolutely.
formulaic tasks where it's always going to be done a very specific policy set way. The computer understands those rules and just constantly processes those rules. So it frees the people up to do a higher level of work, which they're really there to do.
This has been just a fascinating conversation. We're just about out of time. So I'm going to go down the panelists once again and just ask, let's start with some big takeaways from our conversation today, or big lessons learned. You've seen some potholes to avoid, whatever we want to term it as. No agency starts at zero. No agency is done. So maybe start with Mitchell, since we started with Chris on the other end of the table at the beginning. What's a common mistake? What's a common piece of advice you give to your clients when it comes to moving the cloud, dealing with data?
Identify your data, and you probably don't know what's out there. So really think about what's out there. Start understanding what systems talk to each other and how frequently, and start looking at multiple cloud providers. Don't stick with just one. I know there's very big ones. They're probably going to be safe, but also look at other ones that may be interesting to you as well, especially if you want to look at certain software applications.
Excellent. Ed?
From my perspective, I think it's start with a strategy. Don't just go from one application to another, or one data set to another, or things like that. It's basically start with a strategy, figure out what your end goal is going to be or what you're trying to accomplish. Design for mobility and agility so that you can move things around. The cloud is not a destination. It's a place that you may go to, you may come back, you may spend some time there, you may not. It really depends on what your strategy is and what you're trying to accomplish. And so focusing on the strategy is key.
Oki?
I would say think of a cloud strategy as a business strategy, focusing on various business and including a lot of different entities, not just in silos, doing it as a holistic manner and aligning it with the agency's mission. And I really truly believe that HR department is a good model to have a cloud department to leverage a lot of things that are redundant, something that could be trained, guidelines, policy. You could do it once and then reuse that same manner, and and you don't have to. The HR department doesn't manage the people. Same thing with IT. You could have the system owner manage their own system, but you govern the onboarding, the offboarding, the acquisitions, the security, the policy, the 508. Everything has to go in. I think HR department is a good model for that.
All right, and Chris?
So they've covered a lot of good aspects. So I'm going to come at this in a slightly different way to try and add some value. So if you haven't moved to the cloud, an on-prem virtual or private cloud is a good way for your organization to learn. because that's what you're going to be doing in the cloud. So start with that. And then I would say, yes, have a strategy for sure, but I would look at some SaaSes because they're fairly easy to adopt. And you can take, have some wins with some software as a service deployments. That way you can shift some stuff from on-prem to that. And then I think that you're going to have some muscle memory and you can build on deploying some others.
All right, excellent. All good advice. Unfortunately, though, we are out of time for today. So let me thank my guests. Mitchell Schwartz, a systems engineer at Thundercat Technology. Ed Kraychik, the manager of Isilon Systems Engineers at Dell Technologies. Oki Mek, the senior advisor to the chief information officer for the Department of Health and Human Services. And Chris Brown, the deputy chief information security officer at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Thank you so much for taking the time today. You've been listening to the discussion Cloud Migration and Optimization for Government, sponsored by Thundercat Technology and Dell Technologies on Federal News Network. I've been your host, Jason Miller. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search Thundercat.